Now, speaking of big questions, probably the biggest news story in the country at the moment is the poll results that came out last night on TVNZ. Yeah, let's just let Jessica Much here from TVNZ explain the exact results. Most people have heard them, or at least heard of the what some are saying meteoric rise of National is. So let's give Jess kind of 30 seconds to actually explain what the headline results were last night, and let's have a chat about it.
National is now the highest ranking party, sitting on 39, a jump of 7. Labour is just behind on 37, a drop of 3. The Greens are steady on 9, ACT is on 8, down 3, and Te Pāti Māori is on 2. Now take a look at the parties that aren't in Parliament. New Zealand First is
I don't know why we're doing
2,
that, but
and the
fair enough.
Opportunities Party and New Conservative are both on 1. Let's take a look at how that translates to seats in Parliament.
No, we don't need to do that because it translates to seats in the Parliament, meaning that Māori Party in that poll have balance of power. Now, we get this all the time, 18 months out from election. It was Winston Peters' balance of power. It's Māori Party balance of power. It's someone. I don't know the exact research, but it feels like 9 times out of 10 that doesn't actually end up being what happens on the night. But it is certainly fair to say and interesting to look at the decline is a bit of a harsh word, but the decline of Labour and the rise of National, although, as everyone will be aware, especially if you've been consuming content out of this studio, we've all been saying that there's no way the Labour Party would get a majority next election. So obviously they were going to drop. Why National has got the jump they have is a bit perplexing to me, because they've done nothing and provided nothing, but they're an opposition party. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think you've actually answered the question right there. I'm not surprised by this poll at all. I mean, third-term governments in New Zealand's history are the exception rather than the rule. We haven't really had that many. There has been frustration. There are a lot of people who, to quote the Prime Minister, are over COVID. And it's human nature to look for someone to blame. And for a certain number of us, that person to blame will always be the government, whoever is the government at the time. So for just to put that out of the way, I'm not surprised. But what you said is National haven't done anything because they don't have to at the moment. They can promise whatever they like. They can basically, in my opinion, this next election is Nationals to lose. And they were looking like they were giving that a red hot go for quite a while there. They really don't have to do anything at the moment. At the moment, and I'll come back to that point, because at the moment there is a bit of voter fatigue coming in. You and I agreed last time we spoke that I think it's no surprise to anyone that I am a supporter of the government, but there have been things recently that I have had to look twice at, and that I have not necessarily been all that comfortable with.
Like what? What are those?
Well,
things?
some of the communication around MIQ, for example, the response or lack thereof to the protests initially, to the anti-mandate protests, some of the communication around and the speed that we've moved through the Omicron levels, so and all of this stuff snowballs. It all builds up, and people quite often just want to look for a change. But you're right, National haven't done anything, and what they have done is just back to basics, national politics. If in doubt, promise a tax cut. Christopher Luxon hasn't necessarily done anything, but he also hasn't done anything particularly wrong. And I think people underestimate quite how divisive Judith Collins was as a politician and as a person. I mean, she really was a lover or hater politician. She had huge fans, and she just had people, national voters, who she just put off. Luxon is, and I don't mean this to sound mean, but he's a lot more bland in a way than she is. If you dig underneath the surface, there's certain parts of his, personal belief system which personally worry me. But at the moment, he's just kind of, like I say, it's back to basics national politics. It's let's talk about the economy, let's talk about roads, let's promise a tax cut, and let's see what happens. It is worth remembering, though, that we still have 18 months to go, and whether that fatigue lasts 18 months, if we suddenly, and we're not suddenly, but when we start coming out of the COVID restrictions that we're under, the vaccine mandates that we're under at the moment, I do believe there will be a lot of people who go back to looking at what this current government have done and how they've got us through this, and may swing back that way. And also, National have 18 months to start making mistakes. It's a long way to go yet.
Yeah, I also am reminded of course, Don Brash in the Orewa speech. That was probably a year out from the election, massive bump in the polls, and didn't eventuate into anything. It was actually your wife who said to me, we were having she came on the podcast, before the last election, and she said to me, why would we replace an exceptional woman with an average run-of-the-mill man? And I don't think that was a commentary on yay to girls and boo to boys, but in that instance, that's who she was, who her interpretation of the national leader was, whichever of the last 23 iterations we've seen of that was. And
well, I think there's a good point there, and I think the number one reason behind these pollings is simply fatigue. It's simply, we've had this government, they've been in charge, they've done so much right. But people are just tired. They're tired of, not necessarily tired of this government. They're tired of the restrictions that we're living under. And it's not just us. I mean, this is global. Exactly the same thing is happening in Canada. The swing against Trudeau's government over there, simply out of exhaustion. And like I said, we're 18 months away. So whether people get over it, whether people start feeling more positive again, I think there are some things. I think Labor are going to have to get back to actual, hard as it is. I mean, to go back to my point about what National have done, I mean, they haven't had to do anything because they're not running the country.
Sure.
Labor have a lot on their plate at the moment, but at some point they're going to have to get into election mode. They're going to have to start working out not what they're doing now, but what they can promise us for the next 3 years. And that's a gear shift that they're going to have to make. I think we're starting to see signs of that. I think some of the stuff we might be talking about later in the show is just the opening salvos in that war of attrition, which is going to be for the next 18 months. But yeah, it's going to be a big gear shift going from reporting numbers and having a 1 p.m. press conference to actually going, well, this is what we've done. Great. Let's look at that. Let's celebrate that. But what can we expect for the next?
Well, I hope they don't also miss that window, because if it's like that, lies and rumors go around the world 3 times before truth gets its pants on. I mean, if you have a look at the numbers and have a look how we've lived and who we are, New Zealand has the New Zealand government primarily, but let's be fair and say through their health advice and following those, but the government still has to initiate and install those ideas, have handled this COVID crisis for the safety of its people. And you could argue about what happened with business, you could argue what happened with tourism, fine, but for the safety of its people, better than any country in the OECD.
I completely agree.
Simply be able to look at the death rate, just to look at that.
We've been one of the very few countries in the world which put health and health professionals first and foremost ahead of the economy and business leaders. And now that we're this far through, 2.5 years into this pandemic, again, it's simply frustration. I completely understand why business owners are frustrated. I mean, if I was running a hospitality business at the moment, I'd be pulling my hair out if I was still in business. But I think the thing that people need to realize is that we're not unique. That's not special. That's not something that's only happening here and only happening because of the government we have. It's happening worldwide. We're in the middle of, for our generation, or for people, completely unprecedented times. I mean, we didn't live. You and I didn't live through a world war. We didn't live through the Spanish flu epidemic. This is the defining moment in our lives, on a global scale.
For sure.
And
well, we hope.
Exactly.
We hope there's not another one in 6 years from now.
Every time we say that, something else pops up. But so no, I mean, I just simply put, I'm not surprised by this poll. But I also don't know how important it is. It's certainly not panic stations time.